今ドレッシングはノンオイル。油の代わりに香りと
メモ。
そして今、新しい星がニュースを変える。
It was a Tuesday when Keiji Tanaka decided to stop thinking about the noise. It wasn't that the sound was unbearable, far from it. In fact, it had become so familiar, so much a part of the rhythm of his day, that it had almost ceased to exist in his mind as anything remarkable. But, that morning, something about it had changed. Keiji had never been one to give much thought to the workings of the building where he lived. The apartment was ordinary in every way, small, minimalist, functional, a studio with a kitchenette, a bed by the window, and an antique armchair that, though worn, had a lifetime of character. The elevator too was standard, metal walls that bore the scars of countless scratches, a floor that never seemed quite clean, and a button panel that emitted a soft ding when pressed. He had lived in this building for 3 years, and for 3 years the elevator had made the same sound. A soft mechanical whir as it ascended and descended through the concrete belly of the building. For some reason, Keiji had always found comfort in the rhythm of it. It was like the sound of a distant drum beat, marking time, assuring him that the world was still moving in its usual manner. But that Tuesday morning, as Keiji stood waiting for the elevator to arrive, he noticed something. The sound, the whir, was different. It had grown louder, more insistent. It was no longer a distant hum, but a sharp, almost frenzied noise, as if the elevator were in some kind of trouble. Keiji furrowed his brow. He hadn't heard anything like this before. He checked his watch, 8:47 AM. His usual train would be arriving at the station in just a few minutes, and he was already running late. It was a decision he had made often, to leave the house at the last possible moment. But today, for some reason, he lingered by the elevator door, his hand frozen over the button. The sound grew louder, then softer, as if the elevator were breathing, struggling with some invisible weight. It occurred to Keiji that he could press the button again, but it didn't seem right. Something told him to wait. A few moments later, the elevator arrived with a jolt, the doors opening smoothly as if nothing had happened. Keiji stepped inside, casting a final glance at the dim hallway behind him. The elevator was empty, just as it always was at this time of day. He pressed the button for the ground floor. As the elevator began its descent, Keiji couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. Something was shifting in the air. The whir had returned to its usual soft murmur, but the strange feeling lingered, a subtle tension in the pit of his stomach. The doors slid open on the first floor, and a man stepped inside. Keiji hadn't seen him before. He was tall, dressed in a dark, well-tailored suit, the kind of suit that suggested money without being overtly flashy. His eyes were dark, his face pale, and there was something strangely still about the way he moved. The man pressed the button for the basement. His fingers lingered on the panel for just a moment longer than necessary, and Keiji had the fleeting impression that the man was inspecting the buttons, as if trying to decide which one to press, or perhaps searching for something more. Keiji glanced at him out of the corner of his eye, then turned his gaze to the floor. The elevator whirred again, this time quieter, more mechanical, as if it were no longer quite sure of its function. Keiji didn't know why, but he felt compelled to look at the man in the suit once more. Do you ever wonder why the elevator makes that sound? Keiji asked, his voice unexpectedly loud in the still air. The man looked at him, his eyes momentarily blank, as though the question had not quite registered. Then after a long pause, he smiled faintly. "No," the man said, his voice low and soft, like something half remembered. "But I suppose I should." Keiji's mouth went dry. He had no idea what prompted him to ask that question. It wasn't something he'd normally thought about. But now that he had, he couldn't stop the strange sense of unease from creeping up his spine. "Is it normal?" Keiji pressed, his voice barely above a whisper this time. The man's eyes flickered briefly to the ceiling, then back to Keiji. He studied him for a long moment, as if measuring the weight of the question. "Nothing is normal," he said, his words carrying a weight, as if he were speaking of something far beyond elevators and the noises they sometimes make. Keiji swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. The elevator descended further into the bowels of the building, its motion smooth, but the air inside felt thick now, as though it had been charged with something unseen. The man pressed the button for the basement again, even though they had already passed it. Keiji stared at him, wondering why he had done that, but before he could ask, the elevator gave a sudden lurch, as though something in its inner workings had caught, and for a split second, everything went still. The lights flickered, once, twice, and then stabilized, but the man was gone. Keiji blinked, his heart racing. The elevator was empty again. The doors opened to the first floor, just as they had before. He stared at the empty space, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Had he imagined it? Had the man been a figment of his mind? Some kind of apparition conjured by the strange noise of the elevator? The air seemed colder now. The whir of the elevator was steady again, but it had lost its comforting rhythm. Keiji stepped out, his thoughts tangled, a distant ringing in his ear. He pressed the button for the ground floor, but it didn't seem to matter anymore. Something had shifted. As he stood there, waiting for the elevator to move again, he had the distinct feeling that something or someone was watching him from the empty space beyond the doors.